My sister falsely accused me of stealing $110,000 at her wedding. Later, I presented video evidence of her infidelity, shocking everyone. The wedding day exceeded everyone's expectations. My sister Elizabeth looked stunning in her couture gown, and her now husband Brian appeared to be the happiest guy alive. Everything went flawlessly, including the vows, champagne toasts, and dancing. If there was any tension, I couldn't feel it, at least until the night after the wedding. The family had gathered at my parents' house to unwind and discuss the big day. We were in the middle of discussing amusing incidents from the dance floor when Elizabeth stood up suddenly. Her voice shook as she spoke something that struck me like a truck. "John stole our honeymoon money, $10,000. It's gone." The room went silent. I could feel everyone's gaze shift to mine. My mind couldn't comprehend what she had just stated. Stole? Me? That was absurd. Elizabeth went on and on before I had a chance to respond. She described how sad she was, how she had been crying all day, and how she felt betrayed. Brian sat transfixed, as if he'd been hit by a freight train. My parents, on the other hand, acted quickly to help her. "John, how could you do this?" my mother asked, shaking her head with disappointment. "You ruined everything. Steal from your sister? Your own sister?" "Dad," the speaker added, "you're not welcome here anymore." I tried to stand out and emphasize that I had not touched a cent. I said that I had been at the front desk all night, in full view of everyone, and that I had no idea where the money was stored. Brian, to his credit, appeared dubious, stating, "I don't think John would do something like that." But Elizabeth wouldn't have it. "Stop defending him, Brian," she demanded. "He's lying. I can't believe you take his side over mine." "John, you're disgusting. Get out of my sight." I was stunned. Her outrage was not simply about the alleged theft, it was also personal. My parents joined her in informing me that I was no longer a member of the family. My father said, "You are no longer our son." Which was the final blow. I exchanged glances with Brian, who appeared as perplexed as I was, and then went. As I drove away, I started putting things together. I understood exactly why she was doing this. It wasn't about the money, but about our granny. Grandma had made it plain a few months ago that she intended to leave most of her money to me. She trusted I would utilize it carefully and preserve the family legacy. Elizabeth, the self-proclaimed golden child, was enraged. She had attempted to persuade Grandma that she deserved the money instead, but it had not worked. Elizabeth was determined to make me look like a bad person as Grandma's health deteriorated. It was her method of sabotaging me. I was angry, but I knew it wasn't over. If she was going to play dirty, I could play even dirtier. I had a secret of my own, one I'd guarded to protect Brian. Elizabeth had been cheating on him for several months. I hadn't intended to expose her, but after what she had done, all bets were off. I began to plot my retribution. Following that night, I couldn't quit thinking about what Elizabeth had done. The treachery hurt, but what hurt even more was that my parents trusted her without question. I couldn't look at my phone since the family group chat was filled with messages about how I had let everyone down and how humiliated they were of me. It was as if Elizabeth turned a switch, and I became the family evil. But I wasn't about to let her win. Elizabeth believed she could destroy me and walk away untouched. What she didn't realize was that I had been hiding a bombshell for months. Back in August, I unexpectedly caught her with someone other than Brian. I had gone to a coffee shop in the next town to see a friend, and there she was, sitting at a corner table, holding hands with someone I didn't know. They weren't very subtle, kissing, laughing, and acting like a real couple. I didn't say anything at the time since, frankly, it was none of my business. I expected it to come back and bite her eventually. I just never anticipated to be the one who had to bite back. Now I wanted proof. Something substantial, something undeniable. I knew her routine well enough. She'd always claimed she was visiting a friend or running errands when she went missing for a few hours each week. It was obvious what she was up to. My best guess was Thursday, around 7 p.m. That appeared to be her normal window. So I parked down the street from her house and waited. Sure enough, just around 6:45, Elizabeth went out, got into her car, and drove away. I followed her from a safe distance so she wouldn't notice. She returned to the same coffee shop where I had seen her before. The guy waited for her in the parking lot. I parked discreetly across the street and began recording. They hugged and then kissed. And not just a short peck, this was the kind of kiss that made it apparent Brian wasn't even a thought in her mind. They entered and sat near the window, looking like a couple on a lovely date. The man continued leaning in close, stroking her arm and talking into her ear. Elizabeth ate it up. I captured the entire event, 7 minutes of great film that would throw the issue on its head. When they finally left, I made sure to photograph them hugging again before they got into separate cars and drove out. I waited until she had left before driving home. My heart was hammering all the way home, but it wasn't from nerves, but from anticipation. I knew I had something that could destroy her flawless little facade. But I wasn't about to hurry into it. I needed to wait until the appropriate moment. Elizabeth had gone nuclear on me during a family function, so it was only right that I return the favor. I decided to schedule a dinner a few days later and pretend to apologize and make amends. My parents, still upset at me, reluctantly agreed. Elizabeth accepted without hesitation, possibly believing it was her chance to embarrass me even further. She had no idea what was about to happen. The days leading up to the dinner were agonizing. I remained perfectly silent, even as Elizabeth continued to scold in the family group chat about how some individuals refused to accept responsibility for their acts. Naturally, my parents ate it up. Every time I read a text from them saying something like, "We are so proud of you, Elizabeth, for handling this with grace," I wanted to scream, but I remained calm. I knew it would be worthwhile. The morning of the meal, I texted everyone in the family group chat, including Brian. I mentioned that I wanted to meet for dinner and clear the air. "I owe everyone an explanation," I had written. "And I need to apologize, especially to you, Brian." My mother responded immediately, saying they'd be there, but I'd better have a solid excuse for what I'd done. Elizabeth responded with a snide remark about how she hoped I was ready to confess. Brian's response was brief and neutral, just a thumbs up emoji. Perfect. Everything was falling into place. I spent the day getting ready. I loaded the video onto my laptop and checked the quality to ensure it was satisfactory. I also printed screenshots in case someone accused me of fabricating the video. When I arrived at my parents' place for supper, I felt as if I were entering a battle, and I was prepared to win. When I stepped in, the atmosphere was strained. My parents scarcely greeted me, and Elizabeth sat at the head of the table, smug as usual. Brian stood next to her, quiet and reserved, as he had done since the accusation. I wasn't sure if he felt I'd taken the money, but he was certainly keeping his thoughts to himself. We all sat down, and I started by taking a deep breath. "First of all, I want to say that I'm sorry for how things turned out. I know you're all angry with me, and I understand why. But I've been thinking about everything that's happened, and I realize there's something I should have said sooner, something I've been holding back." Elizabeth moved forward slightly, her eyes full with expectation. She undoubtedly felt I was about to confess. My mother and father just looked, waiting. Brian appeared uncomfortable. I took out my laptop, placed it on the table, and opened the video file. "What you're about to see is not easy to watch, I told you. But I think it's important for everyone here to know the truth." Elizabeth's arrogant face broke for the first time as I hit play. The room went hushed as the video began. It shows her walking up to the guy in the coffee shop parking lot, hugging and kissing him. The date in the coffee shop, the way they couldn't take their hands away from each other, and the final shot. Them hugging again in the parking lot before driving away. After the video concluded, there was silence for a few seconds. Then Brian said, "Who the hell is that?" he inquired, his tone harsh. Elizabeth's face reddened. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words emerged. "Answer him," I said. "You accused me of stealing, of tearing this family apart, when all along you were the one who was lying. This isn't your friend, is it? How long has this been going on?" Elizabeth stammered, but Brian did not wait for her response. He pulled back his chair and stood up, his expression a mix of fury and disbelief. "You've been cheating on me?" he asked. "The whole time I was working my ass off to give you the life you wanted, the house, the car, all of it, for this?" My parents looked like they were hit by a vehicle. My mother looked at Elizabeth, her voice cracking. "Elizabeth, is this true?" Elizabeth finally got to speak. "It's not what it looks like," she remarked, but no one believed her. "This will be a lesson for you, Elizabeth," I remarked as I stood up. "You started this war. All I did was finish it." Brian grabbed his keys and departed without saying anything more. My parents, still shocked, turned against me. "How could you do this to her?" my father asked. I responded. "She accused me of stealing $10,000 to make me look bad, and I'm the bad guy for showing the truth? You should ask her how far she's willing to go to cover up her lies." I did not wait for a response. I grabbed my belongings and fled. I didn't want to hear any more excuses. They sought a villain, and they now have one. But this time, it was not me. After dinner, I didn't hear from anyone in my family for many days. No texts, no phone calls, and no attempts to explain or apologize. It was radio silence. I assumed they were trying to clean up the mess Elizabeth had made. Brian was the first to contact out, and he was not even a family member. He contacted me 2 days after the dinner, and I was shocked that he wanted to talk. I assumed he was upset with me for unexpectedly catching him off guard, but he didn't seem angry. "I just wanted to say thank you," he remarked. "For being honest. I wish it hadn't come to this, but I'm glad I know." We talked for a bit, and he told me he had already begun making plans to move out of the house he shared with Elizabeth. He further stated that he had canceled their trip to the Maldives and stopped making payments on the car he had promised to purchase her. "She can figure out her own life now," he joked. I asked him if Elizabeth had tried to contact him since dinner. "She's been blowing up my phone, begging me to understand," he told me. "But there's nothing to understand. She cheated. End of story." Hearing him say that gave me an odd feeling of closure. At least someone in this mess could see clearly. A few days later, my mother finally contacted me. She sent me a long guilty text message about how upset she was in me for ruining Elizabeth's relationship and how family should always be there for each other, no matter what. I stared at the message for a moment, trying to decide whether it was worth responding to. Finally, I sent a simple response. Family supports each other by telling the truth, not by covering up lies. Maybe you should think about that. That did not go over well. My father responded with a note telling me I was being immature and that Elizabeth was still their little girl, regardless of what she had done. That was ridiculous. They were willing to forgive her cheating and manipulative behavior because she was their favorite. Meanwhile, Elizabeth remained silent. No words from her. I wasn't sure if she was too embarrassed to talk or if she was plotting her next move, but I didn't care. She had lost her fiancé, her free trip to the Maldives, and probably the majority of the sympathy she had received from my parents. However, I couldn't ignore the notion that this wasn't over. Elizabeth was not the sort to accept defeat. If she was quiet, it was because she was planning. And I was not wrong. A week later, she moved. I awoke one morning to a flurry of texts from mutual friends and extended family. Elizabeth had apparently started spreading a new tale, claiming that I had set her up to ruin her wedding and harm her relationship. She said that I had been following her for weeks, hoping to catch her slipping, and that the film was a desperate attempt to retaliate against her for exposing the alleged crime. It was ludicrous, but the damage had been done. Some individuals bought her story, particularly those who did not know the full story. They began contacting me, calling me nasty and hateful. Others, thankfully, saw through her lies and informed me that they believed me. But I wasn't about to sit back and let them dominate the story. I had all of the proof, including the video, screenshots, and texts. If she wanted a public fight, I was prepared. But before I could make a move, something unexpected occurred. Brian stepped in. He sent a lengthy letter on social media, explaining everything: the adultery, the charges, the dinner, and even my role in revealing the truth. "John didn't ruin our relationship," he wrote. "Elizabeth did that all by herself. He just showed me what I needed to see. If anyone has a problem with him, take it up with me." The post went viral among our close friends and relatives. It shut down the majority of Elizabeth's supporters overnight. People started contacting me, apologizing for jumping to conclusions. Even my parents stayed silent for a while, perhaps understanding how horrible they looked for taking her side so easily. What about Elizabeth? She doubled down. Her next move would push things to an entirely new level. Elizabeth's next move was both bold and dumb. She attempted to sue me for slander. Yes, you read it correctly. She actually hired a lawyer and filed a lawsuit, alleging that I purposefully harmed her reputation and caused her severe distress. When I was handed the documents, I couldn't determine whether to laugh or be outraged. She wasn't just desperate, she was insane. I did not waste any time. I hired my own lawyer, showed them the video, the texts, and Brian's social media posts, and they assured me that I had nothing to worry about. "This is a fear technique," they said to me. "But if she wants to go to court, we'll go to court." So we did. The court date was approximately a month later. The majority of the family showed up, likely out of morbid curiosity. Brian was also there, sitting quietly in the back. Elizabeth appeared with her lawyer, all smug and cocky, as if she had already won. The judge was not impressed. Her lawyer claimed that I maliciously taped and circulated private footage of Elizabeth, causing her to lose her relationship and social position. But my lawyer instantly shut it down. They emphasized that the footage was recorded in a public place and depicted behavior that directly contradicted Elizabeth's earlier charges against me. They also pointed out that I had only seen the film to our immediate family before Elizabeth's lies made the situation public. Then came the finest part. Brian took the stand. He stated that Elizabeth accused me of stealing without evidence and attempted to isolate me from the family. He said that the video was the only way he discovered the truth about her infidelity. "John didn't ruin anything," he explained. "He saved me from wasting my life on someone who didn't respect me or our relationship." Elizabeth's lawyer attempted to cross-examine him, but Brian did not flinch. He kept to the facts, leaving little opportunity for interpretation. When it was Elizabeth's turn to testify, her story fell apart. She contradicted herself multiple times, claiming at one point that the man on the video was simply an acquaintance and at another that she and Brian were on a break at the time. The judge didn't buy any of it. By the end of the hearing, it was obvious where things were going. The judge dismissed the complaint, concluding that I had not defamed Elizabeth and that the facts I submitted was both true and important. But the real kicker was when the court chastised Elizabeth personally. "You have wasted this court's time with baseless accusations," she told the jury. "It is clear that this lawsuit was an attempt to deflect blame for your own actions. I urge you to reflect on the decisions that led you here today." Elizabeth exited the courtroom in tears. Following that, the tables were turned. My parents, our extended family, and even her closest friends would have nothing to do with her falsehoods. Brian ended all communication and finished the process of moving out. My parents, humiliated and ashamed, eventually recognized they had made a mistake by siding with her. When my father contacted me one night and said, "We made a mistake, I hope you can forgive us one day," it was a quiet admittance rather than a spectacular apology. I promised him I would think about it, and I meant it. After everything they had put me through, forgiveness was not going to come easily. Elizabeth has completely disappeared from the family scene. She relocated out of state a few weeks later, claiming she needed a new beginning. According to what I've heard, she struggled to keep friends and a job. Since then, her reputation has followed her, as it should. I'm not going to pretend that this entire affair hasn't left scars. Yes, it has. But, in the end, the truth won out, and I was finally free of the cloud Elizabeth had attempted to cast over me. I do not regret exposing her. She began the war, and she has paid the price.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.